Today we're going to talk about what your spine might say if it could speak. You know, it's kind of a silly idea for spines to speak, but actually a spine has a lot to say, and we're going to talk about what the spine says today. That spine is very important because you probably think of posture when I first say spine. You know, your parents probably said stand up straight or sit up straight and make sure that you put your shoulders back. But that's not really posture. Posture is actually an unconscious thing. So it's not something you can do, although you can consciously stand up straight. Did you stand up straight for long periods when you were told by your parents to stand up straight or sit up straight? No, you went back into slouch again because gravity was winning. And we're going to talk a little bit about gravity today and its importance in spinal function. Also, a functional spine is very important to good health. My whole practice is dedicated toward receptor-based solutions, and those receptors are in the center line. Those receptors are in muscle, and the highest priority muscles are those of the that are around the spine, the paraspinal muscles. They send very important signals to the cortex, and I'll be talking about those as well. But without those, your brain really doesn't get excited to the extent that it should. A healthy spine is more than good posture. A healthy spine has to move. A healthy spine actually gives you good emotional balance. It gives you good physical endurance. It's very important for your body to work against gravity. And back pain sufferers, they're really not as healthy as they could be if their back was working better. So it all comes down to the spine and spinal health. And people don't really think about their spine when it comes to spinal health. They don't think about their spine when it comes to their health because their spine is just something that they have. Their spine is just something that, could you turn off the music? Their spine is just something that they live with. It might bother them once in a while. They move around and don't even consider spinal function. But as we're going to see, if the core, if your spine, if your neck and shoulders, if your pelvis, abdominal muscles, if they're not working like they should, if they're not working with optimal endurance, your center line breaks down, and that affects your brain and the way it works in the reception area, in the break room, I mean. So what's chiropractic all about? Chiropractic is actually a healthcare discipline. It's a whole idea of making sure that nerve signals flow freely. And that nerve signal is what lights up your brain. Without that nerve signal, your brain really doesn't work like it's supposed to. Your brain doesn't work by itself. It has to have signal coming in to make it work. Chiropractic is based on the relationship of structure and function. Structure and function are inseparable. You think about things in life that are built a certain way. If they were built differently, they would function differently. If your spine is working optimally, then it will send signals to your brain optimally. But if your spinal function breaks down, that is, if the vertebrae get stuck and work as a unit instead of move separately like they're supposed to, that signal that would have been sent by moving vertebrae isn't sent, and that area of your brain that would have received that signal doesn't function to its appropriate level, and as a result, it can't do the job it's designed to do. So you see, structure and function are directly related. And then doctors of chiropractic often work together with other types of doctors, medical doctor, orthopedists, even dentists. They work with all kinds of doctors. Now, I'm both a doctor of chiropractic and a naturopathic medical doctor, so I see things from two different worlds, and they're really not that different, but one world works in natural remedies and the other world works in structural benefit. And so we blend those together, and I can help the brain work at a level that's optimal for that person. So the first organ, let's look back on human development. The first organ to develop is actually the brain. The first organ in your body to work is the brain. Nothing can work without your brain. And then a few weeks after fertilization, you start to hear heartbeat because the brain and the heart start to work together. So that's when a woman will first know that she's pregnant, according to the doctor tests, is you'll hear a heartbeat and they say, here you go, you're in pregnancy. So the brain is so important that it gets encased in bone. It gets encased in the skull. So you want to have your brain protected. One of the big issues these days is concussion, because although this brain is strong, trauma to the head, when you hit the head and the head stops, the brain's a gelatinous substance inside the brain, inside the skull, and it will splash up against the wall at the inside of the skull, and it can cause bruising, it can cause torquing, it can cause vascular changes and affect the way that the brain works. So concussion's a big deal, but the brain needs to be protected because it's such a sensitive tissue. The brain and the spinal cord make up the central nervous system. And the central nervous system is what we're basically talking about today. In the base of the skull is a hole where the brain, which is housed inside here, you might see some bony prominences in here. Those can all affect the way that the brain splashes inside, and the spinal cord goes down through the hole, and that's what continues through the spine. The yellow part here are spinal nerves, and you see blood vessels. The vertebrae should be movable with discs in between every single vertebrae except for C1 and C2, the first two in the neck. There's no discs there. But everything should be movable and protect the central nervous system, the brain, and the spinal cord as it comes through. Now there's several spinal nerves that come out between the vertebrae, and this is where the problems begin, because when those vertebrae get stuck, it'll affect the way the signals come in through those nerves. Most chiropractors want to tell you it'll pinch the nerve, but that really doesn't happen. Those nerves really don't get pinched. If you get a pinching, you get a loss of muscle size, you get atrophy, and that atrophy happens quickly. You can lose 50% of a muscle's size in just 6 to 10 days if there's actual pinching of a nerve. But it certainly feels like a pinching in your back, and that pinching is there as a result of a breakdown of the input that comes through these nerves to the brain and back down again. And we say, ouch, it hurts. So it's very important to make sure that the central nervous system is properly protected, is properly managed, so that pain signals don't get through and your brain appreciates your environment like it should. And any abnormal joint motion of the spine can produce ill health. So here's an example of blood vessels as they sit in the back of the vertebrae body. There's a ligament that goes all the way up and all the way down on the back of the vertebrae body to make sure that the disc stays in place. There's a ligament that comes down the front of the vertebrae as well to make sure that the position of the vertebrae is managed. And then out between the vertebrae come the spinal nerves. And these areas are for rib connections. And you see, they aren't really joints. They're more like connections. And we're going to talk about rib motion in a few minutes. But that rib motion is very important to getting the brain lit up as well. So when a disc bulges, it can put pressure on the spinal cord, and that causes lots of problems. Usually people have disc bulges in their low back, but you can get along just fine with a disc bulge in your low back. A lot of people have bulges and they don't have pain. Some people have bulges and have pain, so it's interpreted that the bulge creates the pain, but that's not really true. The bulge doesn't cause the pain. The pain is because the vertebrae are stuck and not moving as they should, and it's that movement that knocks out the signal. When it reaches your cortex, you say, ouch, I have pain. But until that specific signal reaches your cortex, you don't experience pain. So it's joint motion that's important to keep the pain under control. So vertebral motion, nerve signal, that's all essential to good health. So proper spinal function equals proper brain function, and vice versa. Proper brain function equals proper spinal function. So this is what I was talking about you may perceive pinching, but it's not really a pinch. It's a misalignment, and that misalignment can certainly hurt. But that's not the cause of the pain, just when somebody's moving around and their head doesn't sit on the neck straight. You know, neurologically, the eyes will make your muscles of your neck work a certain way and put your head into a certain posture so that you will perceive that you're level, when in fact you might not be level. But if your head is not sitting on your neck straight for a long period, your brain will think that's normal, and your eyes will move to perceive normal. And this becomes your new normal. But is this right? No, it's not the way you're designed to work. It's not the way God wants that signal to be sent in there. So simply changing eye function can change the way your head sits on your neck. And it's a big issue, because eye function can help take away pain. It can help reestablish balance. The eyes and the spine are hardwired. They're directly connected. So anything you do to the eyes, you do to the spine as well. And just simply manipulating the spine doesn't take care of the eye trouble. So all sensory signal has to come in through the cerebellum. All the joint signal, muscles specifically, comes in through the cerebellum. And I put this picture up here with all of this Greek so that you wouldn't get focused on what is that tissue. But I want to show you it's a timing issue. When it comes to brain function, when it comes to spinal function, when it comes to your spinal health, it all has to do with timing. Nerve signals travel at different speeds. A pain signal will travel at about 0.5 meter per second, 18 inches in a second. Joint signal travels at about 120 meters per second. That's greater than the length of a football field in 1 second. So you see, we'd rather have joint signal, it's called proprioception, than we would have the unconscious pain signal, it's called nociception. So it doesn't matter the speeds right now for what I want to show you, but look at distance. If this is where we start and we want to come back here, going in several ways, we can eventually come back here. Just follow the arrows, and it'll take a while to get there. Or you can go directly through and come right back again. So there's different timings, and all of those timings have to work together, and everything has to be in sync. You can take a long way, you can take a short way, but nevertheless, when that tissue gets stimulated from long way or short way, it has to be in sync. And that's what pain control is all about. That's what chiropractic neurology is all about. It's having every signal synced up so that your brain is working as optimally as it can. Spinal function, muscle function, those things have to be working all together. So spinal function causes joint stiffness and lack of motion. It can lead to inflammation. That inflammation leads to further degenerative change, which will cause tension, general sense of weakness, causes sickness, can lead to infection, because actually the nervous system and the immune system are the same system, except the immune system wanders and the nervous system stays still. Otherwise, whatever you do to one, you do to the other. They're exactly the same system. So when spinal function breaks down, when joint signal isn't optimal to the brain, when the brain loses its ability to endure properly, it's the same thing with the immune system. It'll start to be tired. And the immune system issues can lead to further degenerative changes, and around you go. This is a vicious cycle, but it can be interrupted. It can be interrupted and turned around. You will be healthy again under chiropractic care when it's done appropriately. So don't let spinal misalignments hold you back. Get them diagnosed, get them treated, and get rehabilitation to make it work better. Anything you do over a long period, exercise, diet, chiropractic, needs to be done regularly, because gravity will have its way with you. I told a story one time about my brother Barney. Barney was a lineman in Anaheim. He would climb high tension wires, And my mom said, because he was such a big guy, it looked like a bear going up a tree. So one day he came in to see me, and he sat down next to my desk, and I said, "How are you doing today?" He says, "Well, my knees hurt." I said, "Your knees hurt? What happened?" He says, "Well, I was walking down the street, and I turned a corner, and I stepped into a gravity storm." I said, "A what?" He says, "A gravity storm." I said, "Barney, what's a gravity storm?" He says, "You know, I fell down." He got sucked into a gravity storm. So be careful of gravity storms. They're out there. You don't want to be caught in them. But those gravity storms are the same thing that affect us as we sit. If the two sides of our cortex are balanced, gravity will pull with equal strength on each side. But if one side of the cortex has more signal than another one, you will find the opposite sides of the body. There's more muscle tone on one side than the other. And when gravity has its way with an imbalanced body, and we'll see a picture on how that works, it'll cause more drag on one side than the other. And gravity is the thing that causes these nerve signals to break down, because the incoming signal to the cortex is not appropriate. It's not balanced. It's not symmetrical. So everything we do, including chiropractic, needs to be done on a regular basis. So here's some benefits of chiropractic care. Number one, pain relief. I talked about nociception and proprioception, how proprioception, the fast signals, have to keep the nerves in the spinal cord busy so that nociception can't get through. And that's the same as everybody. Everybody has nociception all the time. But it's when proprioception breaks down, it's when joints don't move properly and muscles don't send the right signal. That's when nociception can get into the cord and up into the brain, where we say, "Ouch, I hurt in my low back or my shoulder," or whatever it is, because those areas aren't getting the right signal, the right proprioception. Chiropractic care is drugless. We don't use drugs. As a naturopath, we have licenses in various states to use drugs, anything except hallucinogenic narcotics. We can use those things, but I practice in California because I choose not to use drugs. I don't have to use drugs if I worked in Arizona, where I'm licensed, but even if I was in Arizona, I still would not be using the drugs, because there are ways to make things happen without drugs. Believe me, I am sure glad that there are drugs out there for people to use, because sometimes they're necessary. I'm so glad that there are surgeons out there, because sometimes that's necessary. But a lot of times we can help manage health issues naturally and druglessly. Nutritional guidance. As well as being a naturopath and a chiropractor, I've got degrees in nutrition, written books on nutrition. Nutrition is very important, and it's something I profess to my patients all the time, that they should eat right. A lot of my patients do eat right, and sometimes I have to take them aside and give them some direction. We even do a nutrition exam. We can examine a person with muscles to check their organs. We can check them with their diet analysis, put it all together, and see how their tissues are being nourished. Options for cancer patients. Do we treat cancer? No, we don't treat cancer. But we can treat patients that have cancer, making the tissues healthier and keeping them stronger and healthier while they're going through their cancer therapies. We can help manage pregnancy. I've written about pregnancy in the past. I have pregnant patients, and some patients, they've come to me because they're unable to be pregnant. For the most part, those people who have come to me that want to be pregnant, that have not had good luck doing it, we've been able to help them get pregnant just by making the nervous system. And as we'll see in just a second, we'll see that the centerline structures relate to centerline structures, which are hormone related. And making a spine work properly can help a brain and the endocrine system work properly. Recovery from surgery. Patients who've had surgery, I tell them, as soon as your wounds are healed, as soon as you're able to get in, come in. There's plenty of things we can do to help your tissues heal nutritionally, chiropractic adjustments, exercise, things to make their system work better. And then we have individualized rehabilitation also. We can give people exercises to do. Sometimes they're very simple and sometimes they're more complicated, depending on the person's ability, their nervous system, to metabolize the signal and keep being strong. We don't want to have a person do exercise and then exceed their capacity and have their ability to endure go downhill. There are very specific signs that we see when a person gets too far into exercise and they start to break down. We want them to fall short of those points so that they will continue to build themselves up. We can help improve athletic performance. One of my favorite stories is one day I went to, one weekend I went to London and I taught, and the doctor who hosted the seminar, his son had been swimming for many years, but he's never won a gold medal, and he was coming up to his very last race. And the dad asked me, would you take a look at my son? I said, sure. And I examined him and I treated him. Here comes the race. He got out first. He did not give up the lead, and he won his gold medal. It was so exciting to be part of that, because he was able to win finally against this guy that continued to beat him over and over and over again. That was a wonderful day. It felt really, really rewarding. Fewer hospital visits, because people stay healthier and stronger, because people are able to live in their environment without pain and their system is not breaking down. There's fewer hospital visits. Customized treatment. Every patient that comes in gets a different type of care because of what they need. I don't treat patients all the same. And those of you in here who have been treated by me know that there's always something different that happens based on where you are with your daily walk in your health. We can treat acute and chronic conditions. Again, pain control. Bringing it down to how do we make the tissues control pain, and we can do that naturally. And then improves depression and mental health. When I lecture around the world, one of the classes I talk about is some research that's done on turning around depression and a specific area of the brain that can actually reproduce neurons. And how do we get those tissues stimulated so that it will help? And this has specifically to do with PTSD, with depression, and so forth. Just get out and exercise. Well, that's not really the answer. It's getting the tissues to enhance the signal so that you can turn on the pathways that will make this depression go away. So that's one of my favorite lectures to give. So if your spine could speak, what might it say? I think your spine might say, work with me. Work with me. The spinal cord. The spinal cord in the embryo comes down to the very end of the spine itself, the green being the spine, the yellow being the spinal cord. So in utero, they're the same length. At birth, it looks like the spine lengthened. Well, it did, but the cord didn't. And this part, called the cauda equina, is like a horse's tail. We'll see another picture of it in just a minute. But it connects up to the very bottom here, to the very bottom of the spine, and the spinal cord stays the same length. And then in the adult, the spinal cord actually ends about L1, L2. And then the cauda equina comes down here. I've had patients come in and had their doctors have told them with a low back disc problem is pressing on the cord. And I have to take patients aside and give them an anatomy lesson and say that doesn't happen. It doesn't press on the cord because the cord's not there. That cauda equina, the horse's tail, is like fibrous nerves that come down and they exit 2 by 2, one on each side as they come down. In fact, this is the picture here. This is cervical spine. This is thoracic spine. Here's your lumbar spine, low back. Here's the sacrum and the coccyx. So in the adult, the spinal cord ends about L1, and the cord here, now this is the spinal canal that's opened up so that you can see the cord better. The cord here in the center, these are called spinous processes. This is the part that you feel that's bumpy in your back. So this is inside the spine itself. Remember I showed you it's deep inside the bone, okay? So this is the cord, and the green relates to cervical nerves, and they come straight out through between the vertebrae. The thoracic nerves come out between the vertebrae too, but because the thoracic spinal cord levels are higher than the end of the thoracic spine, they have to come down before they can go out. And then the lumbar nerves of the spinal cord are very high. Look, we're still in thoracic spine. You see that? It's still related to thoracic spine. So they have to come way down to come out, and then the sacral nerves have to come way down. So this part here, the cauda equina, there's plenty of room in the spinal canal in order for those nerves to go. But if the spinal canal closes up, it becomes more of a problem. Remember I said nerves don't get pinched for the most part, but if they do, you'll have atrophy. If the spinal canal closes down to a certain point where you do get pressure on nerves, you'll start to see leg size diminish, and it diminishes quickly. So that's one of the things we'll look for. We have a company that comes in once a month and does electrodiagnosis just for that reason, to examine lower body or to examine if there's some foraminal changes in the neck that close down and pinch the nerves. We can find those things. But for the most part, it doesn't happen. Or if it does happen, we can adjust the spine to make things work so that those discs can get sucked back into the center where they belong. Upper body versus lower body. There's right about the shoulder blade level is a dividing line of upper and lower body. This part being for more functional work and this part being for more balance. The lower body is for balance and the upper body is for purposeful movement. And then there's a line that we would draw right through right through the side that divides front to back. And then there's a line that we draw right through the center line that divides the right side from the left side. So most of the time, these, in fact, with few exceptions, these nerves don't transit one place to the next. They don't. Even in the spinal cord, and I don't have a picture of it, you can see if you take a section of the lump of the spinal cord, you can see where the nerves from the shoulders come into the spine by where those tissues, those pathways begin. Otherwise, you don't see it down below. So there's definite demarcations. It's all laminated, it's all organized, and as a neurologist, we study that lamination and organization so that we know where those tissues come from and go to. A healthy spine. What's a healthy spine look like? It'll be straight front to back. All the spinous processes will line up in the center line, equal distant from one side to the other. These, what's called transverse processes, are actually areas that will connect up muscles and help stabilize the spine. And then from the side, we have curves that are very unique. The cervical lordosis, thoracic kyphosis, another lordosis, and another kyphosis. Those are natural curves. If you go to receptorbasedsolutions.com to the blog page and look up, I have an article on scoliosis. Scoliosis, they're finding, has to do with the semicircular canals in the ears. So if a person has some balance issues, it's going to affect the way your spine works and give you a curvature that might be augmented from what it should be, or it might be straighter than it should be. And those things are found simply related to vestibular neurons from your ears, the semicircular canals that tell you where you are in space. And then all the spinal muscles, and we'll see more pictures of that in just a minute, they provide a center line for your body to do the rest of its work. It's all has to do with center line. So your spine might say, work with me so my signals flow freely. Essential for good health, getting proper nerve signal. Another one, if your spine could speak, what might it say? Your spine might say, I have to move. I have to move. So in childhood, there's 33 movable bones. This is an adult spine because the number of bones is different. In a child, there's 5 sacral segments, and those sacral segments in the adult grow together to make one solid bone. But otherwise, everything has to move freely. We call that movement afferentation. Afferentation is a big word that means signals add to the center line. They come in from the periphery to a place where they stop, wherever that is. They stop, and then there's 3 jumps before you get to the cortex. Okay, so afferent signals have to make the next tissue do its job. So it has an afferent signal comes in to a synapse where the nerve ends and another one begins, And inside that synapse, inside the cleft, is where neurotransmitters are displayed so that the next neuron can do its job. And again, that happens until finally it reaches the brain. You can have a problem in any one of those areas wherever there's a synapse. But the signal has to do with afferentation. We have to be well afferentated in order to get the system to work as it should. And that afferentation comes from coupling the vertebrae moving properly. An afferent signal adds to the brain. De-afferentation, a reduction of that sensory input, is a breakdown, and it's not normal. But we see de-afferentation so often, and it's an easy thing to find. I'll show you some de-afferentation in just a minute. But I put this picture in here because all sensory input to the brain comes from some sort of receptor, for the most part muscles, but it has to come up the spinal cord to get to the brain, and then the brain does its thing and sends a signal back down again so we can move. It all has to happen like that. So there can't be any disruption in the signal, and that all has to do with spinal function. That coupled motion, the vertebrae should move in every direction. The vertebrae should move through flexion, lateral bending, and torque. Now in the thoracic spine, you get more flexion and extension. You don't get much torque. In the lumbar spine, you can have torque, you can have flexion extension. The neck, you can have all sorts of movements. But the point is, it has to be coupled, where one muscle contracts, another one has to relax so the first muscle can do its job of contracting. And they have specific ways they can move. Lateral bending, the neck vertebrae should actually swing to the periphery of the curve, and the lumbar spine should move to the inside, to the concavity of the curve. So many times we take pictures of people's spines and we see the neck vertebrae coupling to the inside. Not good. Not good at all. In the thoracic spine, they move various ways. But coupling is very important because without coupled motion, you don't have proper signal. And here's a dynamic spine so that you'll see when it bends off to one side, these vertebrae should go that way, and these vertebrae should go that way. Okay, another idea of what coupling looks like. With fast stretch adjustments, that's exactly what we do. We move the vertebrae in the direction that it should go in order to turn on the pathways that should be turned on and quiet the pathways that shouldn't be turned on so that you excite the brain in the way it's designed to be excited. So let's look here. If left lateral bending causes the vertebrae to swing that way, and if right lateral bending causes the vertebrae to swing that way, so often we see when people do lateral bending views, because patients often ask me, why do you take so many x-rays? I want to see stuff like this. When they bend to the right, for example, those vertebrae often couple to the inside of the curve. Well, stay with me here. When you bend your head to the right, you should have contraction of the muscles on the inside of the curve and relaxation of the muscles on the outside of the curve so you can get your head that way, right? That movement is associated with the vertebrae going a certain way. But if the vertebrae go the wrong way, what signal is that sending to the brain? That sends a signal that your head went the other way. And so people might think their head is off to the right side, but their nerve tissue, because of the way the vertebrae move, says, my head went to the left. And so it causes relaxation of the muscles on the inside of the curve and contraction of the muscles on the outside of the curve. And over time, this will cause joint breakdown. It'll cause degenerative changes. It'll cause pain. And it'll lead to other body functions that aren't appropriate because input is required before output can be appropriate. If you have a breakdown of sensory input, you'll have a breakdown of motor response. And we can find that in the muscles. And in just a minute, I'm going to show you a demonstration on how we can check spinal muscles and see how they're working. So people will often say, I don't need to see a chiropractor. I feel fine. When a person adjusts their own neck and they feel fine afterwards, they feel fine because the movement that they just created drives their brain away from their ability to perceive how they feel, so they seem to feel better, but actually their brain's function is diminished. Wow. They drive their brain away from their ability to perceive how they feel, and so they seem to feel better. So if you have a restricted joint here and you crack your own neck, you'll get the pops, but it's not necessarily appropriate, because when a chiropractor goes in and adjusts the vertebrae, they're going to go to a specific area. And when somebody adjusts their own neck, I'll ask them, look, for 2 weeks, please do not adjust your own neck. Let me do the adjustments. If you're hurting, come in. I'll be glad to adjust you again. And it's amazing. Every time a person will commit to that 2 weeks, they come in and they say, my neck doesn't bother me anymore, because we get it to move as it's designed to move. Now, the thoracic spine. This area is where, remember back a few slides, I showed you the contact areas where the ribs meet the spine. Well, those aren't really joints. They're held together by ligaments, and they're allowed to move. But those movements should be very specific, because movements of the ribs are related to the spinal muscles, excuse me, and those spinal muscles send a signal to the brain, but those spinal muscles have to move in such a way so that the ribs are free. Anybody in here had rib pain? You say it feels like a pinching. It's a sharp, like knife being stuck in my spine. That's exactly what it feels like. So when a person inhales, the ribs go up. And when they exhale, the ribs go down. The movement upward of the ribs increases the cavity space, so it draws air in, and the movement downward contracts that cavity space so that it blows air out. Well, we think that breathing is just for ventilating the lungs. No, actually those rib connections in the front on the sternum and in the back on the spine turn on the cerebellum, because, as I said, centerline structures relate to centerline structures. If you make your ribs in your middle back work properly, and one of the last things I'll do to a person is adjust their ribs, I have them actually lean back and drop their head back, and that mimics a breath in. And I'll adjust them at that point so that I get the maximum nerve signal and they ventilate better, so they get better oxygenation. So when it comes to working spinal function, rib function is just as important. So I think a brain might say, I got to move so that your brain stays excited. All those structures have to be working in unison. Another thing I think a brain might say, if it could speak, would be, I need more energy. Well, that's kind of weird for the brain to need energy. That energy is called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. No reason to understand the big word, but ATP is what it's all about. Every time there's a system inside your cells called the Krebs Cycle, and for every time that Krebs Cycle turns once, you'll produce 2 molecules of ATP. But then there's the next step, is called the electron transport chain. In that electron transport chain, that's where ATP is built up, and it's got to be built up in a special way, and the signals jump, the chemicals jump from one place to the next and build up this powerful molecule known as ATP. And this happens inside the mitochondria, inside every cell, where you get this signal, this metabolic pathway that has to turn, and then the electron transport chain, and then your ATP comes out. In my basic neurology class, my teacher, Ted Carrick, showed us pictures of spinal tissue that's got rich mitochondria, so that these muscles are working 24/7, keeping us up and resisting gravity. And he showed us pictures of tissue that had been vertebrae that had been stuck over a long period, and the mitochondrial population is way lower, much lower, meaning that this tissue can't endure. It can work, it can produce a little bit of energy, and it's going to fail, but the other side is going to work really well. So that pulls the vertebrae over toward the muscle. It's working really well, and it gets stuck. And that's the subluxation we're talking about. There were 5 rats that went up in the space shuttle in the 80s, and after 2 weeks they brought the rats back and sacrificed them, and they found that these rats had lost their ATP because they didn't have a need for it. But they lost 30% of their function after 2 weeks, and we lose 50% in 6 to 10 days. So if the ATP drops down, if the population of ATP drops down, you will find spinal function very quickly. So I don't want to give you a big biochemistry course, but it's very exciting to me to share this with you. This is electron transport chain, and at this place here, cytochrome C, this is where light hits the nucleus of the cell, light hits that pathway, and it'll actually turn on the ability to make the ATP. Light is required to make that happen. So people usually turn to lasers. Well, lasers are one type of light. We have a Soluma, which is exactly the same frequency as a laser, and that Soluma, and by the way, this is okay to look at because it's not laser, this is LED lights. We can turn it on to aches and pains. The blue light helps tissue be healthier, but it's the red light, and you'll start to see it twinkle or pulse. It's that pulsing that gets into the tissues, about an inch into the tissues, and can help the ATP be produced at a higher level. Lasers require a doctor to be there or somebody to operate it. With the Soluma, we can put it on and leave it on. So it just depends which one you want to do. People can't take lasers home, but people can take a Soluma home. And the Soluma is made by a company called Biophotos. With full disclosure, I'm on the medical board, and these are the things that we study. This was found at UCI about that cytochrome C and the light and the way it affects cytochrome C. So this Soluma helps people heal up their tissues very quickly. We have a bed back here that it looks like a tanning bed. It's not really a tanning bed. It's a bed that has long tubes on it, and these tubes are designed to help build collagen, and there's tubes that help build vitamin D, and then there's other tubes like the blue light here. It helps complexion, and people can be in that bed for about 20 minutes and help get a lot of collagen, a lot of vitamin D. This does it in a focused area, like if a person has a low back problem, they can put it on their low back and leave it about 20 minutes. It feels warm. The lights are very helpful. It turns on the ATP that makes those spinal muscles endure. And when ATP comes into the spinal muscles, they can do their job, so the stuck vertebrae can become unstuck and they can work better. It's a very exciting process, but ATP is the key. Your brain needs ATP. Your brain needs a cerebellum that's intact. At the last class, we talked about breathing, and the cerebellum is one of the most oxygen-sensitive tissues in your whole body. It receives input only from muscle, and so your cerebellum has to work in order for those muscles to work properly. If your cerebellum gets tired, muscles start to contract and lock vertebrae down. They lock other joints down, and that breaks down that signal, so you get deafferentation, not afferentation itself, but the deafferentation, as we said, reduces the signal to the brain, and there goes your performance. So this is skeletal muscle, the stuff we're talking about with the highest incidence, the highest priority signal to the cerebellum. It comes into the cerebellum itself, which gets input from other areas, and the cerebellar nuclei send signal to the brain stem inside the base of the skull, and that goes to the cortex, and then it can come back down to the muscle. From the brainstem, it can come down to the muscle. So there's lots of signal. Remember I said it has to be timed right. It all has to do with timing. So this is a nice schematic on where the nerves come from and go to. But if you have a breakdown in timing, if this avenue is slower than this avenue, you're going to have muscles that don't work right. It's all timing. Liz, ask me the question, what's the most important thing in comedy? When I ask you to ask me that, you ask me, what's the most important thing in comedy? Are you ready? Okay, now I want you to ask me, what's the most important thing in comedy? Timing. And that's the issue, is that it has to be on time in order to be appropriate. So balance is important too. As we said, there's nerves that come from above the shoulder blades and below the shoulder blades. There's nerves that come on the right side and the left side, and nerves that come on front and back. And those nerve signals all have to be balanced. All have to be balanced. When a patient's on the table, I'll start at the legs, work up to the top. I'll work from one side to the other. I flip them over. I'll work from front to back and make sure everything is tidy before they're done. So balance is important. This is a crankshaft for a car. Any mechanics in here? These crankshafts are designed so that, and we'll just look right here. When a engine works, the pistons go up and down, but a couple of them work at the same time, but they don't fire at the same time. This one's firing and this one's exhausting, so that they'll both go down, and this crankshaft has to be working in a way that's properly timed through the whole mechanism. Can you imagine what would happen if one of these was out of time? If the crankshaft had part of it that was a little bit sooner or a little bit later than it's supposed to be, the engine wouldn't work, would it? And that's the same thing as the spine. It has to be in balance, it has to be in time, and it has to send the signals to the cortex. So here's a picture. I could never do this. But the picture is important because I want to show you the muscle here and the muscle here being different colors. They're doing different things. The muscles in the hamstrings and the muscles in the quadriceps are doing different things. They have to be timed. When one muscle works, another one has to be quiet so the first muscle can do its job. Okay, this would be the optimum for somebody to be able to do this in a perfectly balanced manner. I'm sure there's people that can do this. I couldn't do that. My muscles are not timed like that. It takes practice. It takes consistency. It takes endurance. It takes a lot of work. And it takes a lot of work to resist gravity too, to stay upright against gravity. So if your brain could speak, I think it might say, I need more energy so I can keep moving. If your spine could speak, I think it might say, I'm the core. I'm the center line. And so a centerline structure has to do with all those centerline muscles. Those muscles from top to bottom that connect up the base of the brain, base of the skull, to the pelvis, right side to left side, inside the ribs, all of that has to do with core. The core has to do with centerline structures. Centerline structures relate to centerline structures. So here's a signal that comes up to part of the brain that creates release of hormones to the pituitary, to the adrenals, for example. This is adrenal corticotropic hormone, and makes the adrenal glands do its job, and then it feeds back up here again so that you get a balance of the outflow of hormone, and then this is what it does. But that's just one example. The same thing can happen with the thyroid. The same thing happens with testicles and ovaries. The same thing happens with all those endocrine systems, and it's all related to centerline structure. If you've got problems with those organs, you have to look to the spine. If you've got problems with those organs, you have to look to the eyes, because centerline structures relate to centerline structures that are all hardwired. It's not simply going into the chiropractor and getting your back cracked. And then core stability. I mentioned that already. Those muscles have to work. Abdominal muscles are part of the core. You have to take those into account and make sure that they're all working. So those muscles all get picked up by the nerve signal that goes to the brain and comes back down again through the nerves to the muscles. It's all based on sensory input. So if your spine could speak, I think it might say, I'm the core, I'm crucial for your health. Can you get Matt for me? One more thing I want to mention. Put your arm to your side and raise it up to 90 degrees. At this point, your shoulder blade has stayed still so that your arm muscles can work, can lift up relative to a shoulder blade that's still. Your shoulder blade becomes the stabilizer. This is called spurt motion and shunt stability. If you raise your arm above 90 degrees, the shoulder blade then moves, and the shunt stability moves more central to the spine so that your whole arm can get up. Okay, arm motion, arm and scapular motion. But the centerline structure stays constant as the foundation for this movement. If you have a breakdown of shunt stability at the center line, you're going to have a breakdown of all body function. And so that center line Shunt stability in the centerline, the ability of the vertebrae to move the vertebrae, the ability of the muscles to move the vertebrae properly is what this foundation is all about. Without spinal stability, you don't have much brain signal that's appropriate. All right, Matt, come on up. This is my son, Matthew. Take your hat off. And take your hat off for me. And your glasses too, because I'm going to have you on your tummy.
Oh. That's what I don't think I did.
So lie on your tummy for me. I want to show you a simple test for spinal muscle function. Your head goes right in there, Matt. So we're going to use the hamstrings. Hold strong, Matt. That's a strong muscle. We're going to use it as what's called the indicator. The test that I'm going to use is called Gallant test, and it's used with newborns. A doctor will stroke the back, and Matt's not going to do it now because he's older than 6 months, obviously. But when they stroke the back, the child curls up on the same side. That's the proper response. So I want to show you that, hold strong. There's a strong muscle. Hold strong. And that shuts off. That's appropriate. That response was the right response to say that the nerve and muscles in this area that support his paraspinal system are sending the right signals to his cortex. Let's check the other side. Hold strong. Good. Let's tap the opposite side. Hold strong. And that should do the same thing. It should cause what we call a cross-cord response, and the muscle that would tapping here turns on the hamstring on the same side, so it should turn off the hamstring on the opposite side. So this was appropriate. Remember I said from the shoulder blades up is a different neurology than from shoulder blades down. So let's tap above the shoulder blades, hold strong, and that should be inhibited. If I stroke on the opposite side, hold strong, that should be inhibited because these systems, just like I showed you in the diagram, remember the lines that were there, it cut up the body into different sections. These sections should work together, but opposite. Hold strong. And if we stroke the opposite side, hold strong. That's what should happen. Now, it's not unusual for me to work on a patient and stroke their back and do a test, and now we just faked that, but that's what happens. The muscle of the hamstring doesn't shut off like it's supposed to, saying that these muscles aren't sending the right signal up to the brain. So then it's my job, excuse me, then it's my job to find out where is that limitation in the spinal function. And I try to go as far up as I can to find out where is this problem. Because, again, I don't have a slide to show it, but up in the neck, if there's neck problems, they'll affect lower body before upper body. So I trace down where is that issue and then do whatever I need to do to fix it. Adjustments, do therapies, I'll do eye exercises, I might give a person a specific vitamin for that issue, nutrients of various kinds. I might look and see his movement patterns and try and change some ergonomic issue that he's got going on to make that turn around. Now, Matt, stand up for me. I want you to stand over here. And we can do the same thing with the deltoid muscle in the upright posture. Hold strong. So that's a strong deltoid. Now I'm going to stroke. Turn around so we can see the camera. I'm just going to do that to his back. Turn around here. Hold strong. And that's a natural response. That should happen. I'm tapping the other side. Hold strong. And that should happen. It's not unusual for me to stroke a person's back, and I just faked that test, but that's what we see. And that's a person who has too much spinal extension. Their body, thinking about it, I'm all done. Okay. Their posture is in too much extension. That's what that test represents. A person who's lying on their tummy and the muscles don't work right, their posture is more flexion. In both cases, gravity wins. In this case, this is an oxygen metabolism issue, and in this case, it's a nerve signal issue. But in both cases, it's a compromised structure. If a person has a cerebellum problem on one side, they'll tend to fall to that side. If you close your eyes and with your feet together and stand still, people will lean to the side of the cerebellum that's weaker. And this is a cerebellar posture. If a person gets perturbed or stimulated or pushed or startled to go the other direction, they don't have the time to get over here to protect themselves, so falling becomes an issue. And then there's another posture with a right foot forward or a left foot forward gait pattern, and those postures have their own issues to them. So there's 6 different postures a person can get into, but they can all be rehabbed. There's specific exercises, and there's specific nutrients, and there's very individualized approaches to take to help turn these people back around again. So that's what we look at. We look at what the spine might say if it could speak. We look at the nutrients related. We look at the nerve signals that are going to the cortex. We look at all the spinal function and try to turn it around so a person's nerves are sending the right signal, and it doesn't come down to just adjusting a spine. The spine has to endure. It has to endure, and the vertebrae have to move one relative to the other. All right. Are there any questions about what we just spoke about? I love the subject of spine. It's so, it's a dynamic issue. Yes?
What came to my brain when you were demonstrating how you weaken this muscle? Sometimes you see in a movie somebody will touch someone in a certain place and boom, they collapse or they lose their strength. Is that what is happening?
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. There are strategic spots that can do that. I have martial arts experts that come in all the time, and when I show them certain reflexes, they say, oh, that's what that's for. Because they'll use it for one thing, but they find out that it happens for something else too. So these reflexes are very common, very well known. You can knock somebody out by contacting just the right spot. That's what it's all about, eliminating your partner at the right time.
Now I know.
Yes? Any other questions? All right. Yes?
If you have sleep apnea, will that affect?
Oh, yes. It'll affect the oxygenation. It'll affect the way your cerebellum works. There's a place inside your brain, way deep inside, called the basal ganglia. And the basal ganglia is a decision-making area where it will allow certain things to happen, and then there's another pathway that says to that first pathway, no, slow down. Don't do this, do that. So it's more of a controlling mechanism, but it all has to go through a place in the brain before it gets up to the cortex. And this sleep apnea will slow down all of that process because it doesn't have the oxygen it should, doesn't have the right nerve signal that it should, and it can cause brain tiredness and all of the things that come along with it. Brain fog, it can cause balance issues, it can cause memory issues. People wake up and they say, oh, I didn't sleep very well. And that's an important part of waking up, is being refreshed. So yes, sleep apnea has a big part to play.
What does a CPAP machine actually do?
It'll increase the ventilation so that you get more oxygenation during sleep. People with sleep apnea will stop breathing at certain points. And when you stop breathing, obviously you're not being ventilated properly. And so nerve tissue becomes more acid, and you get the breakdown products of all that.
So it not only turns off the snoring, which is a flap in the back of the throat, which wakes you up and keeps you kind of on the edge of wakefulness, so to speak,
Yeah,
so you don't get good sleep.
Right, so you don't get good sleep.
Okay.
And that weakness there, that's a 9th and 10th cranial nerve issue. And those cranial nerves, 3, 7, 9, and 10 are autonomic nerves that that do things that you don't have to worry about. 3 for vision, 7 for swallowing and taste, and 9 and 10 for swallowing and digestion, and so forth. But if 9 and 10 aren't working, the muscles of the palate are controlled by those cranial nerves, and if the cranial nerves lose their integrity, that muscle becomes lax, and then you snore. So you want to keep the tissue level, the tissue function level high, so that those muscles work like they're supposed to, and you won't snore.
So if you see if that machine kind of blows up your throat like a balloon.
Yeah, it's therapy to make sure that you ventilate. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? I appreciate you coming. And make sure everybody signs a paper because we want to give away a book and your email address. And be sure and eat plenty of goodies. Thank you.